Good morning, guys. Let's begin today's session. Keep your back and neck straight. Sit comfortably and very gently close your eyes. Start observing your breath. Watch the natural flow of your breathing as you are inhaling and exhaling. Slowly shift your attention to your posture. See if you need to make any adjustments. Coming back to your breath, begin to consciously deepen your breathing. Now, after your inhalation, retain your breath for 2 seconds and then go into the process of exhalation. Inhale and exhale. We'll chant Om 3 times, followed by the Shanti mantra. Inhale deeply, Om. We'll begin the chanting. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah. सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः। सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। Inhale for Om. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Just observe the vibrations. Join your palms together and rub your palms together. Place your palms on the eyes. Very slowly, while blinking and looking at your palms, begin to open up your eyes, start coming back with a smile. And namaste to everyone. Let us begin today's session. So, today we are starting with the concept of the 8 limbs of yoga, right? So, we are starting with Ashtanga Yoga. 8 limbs of yoga, right? ASHTANGA. Asht means 8. So ASHT, this term is Sanskrit counting, right? In your Ashtanga classes also you would have seen something like similar to this being pronounced when the 8th count comes in. So Asht means 8 and Ang means limbs. So Ashtanga. Okay. So this is the practice given for a beginner level student. Okay. So beginner level student is also very advanced when it comes to this form of yoga, which is your Raj Yoga, right? This is a part of Raj Yoga. So this is also, the beginner is also quite advanced, right? And when they plan to step into this form, all right? So we are going to discuss let's see how many limbs we are able to cover today, okay? So why is this so advanced, Why does a beginner also is supposed to be advanced? It's because the first 2 limbs in themselves are very, very, hard to stick to. Okay. So first limb is Yama, YAMA, which are basically social observances, right? And second one is Niyama, which are like your personal disciplines. NIYAMA. So, like I told you guys, this is an advanced level practice. So, still the Raj Yogi, till a really high stage, they stay in the society, right? So, that is why these first two limbs are given. First limb is telling us how we need to exist with the society, all right? How we have to exist with our surroundings. Even when the yogi goes in isolation, there are surroundings, right? He is surrounded or she is surrounded by the external environment, right? So, how is the interaction supposed to be? What is the correct way of interacting? Okay, we can interact in multiple ways, but what is the correct way of interacting? That is highlighted by the yamas. Okay, and then how we have to conduct our own selves. What is the correct way of interacting with our own selves, right? So we have this daily talk and interaction with ourselves, right? So there is a right and a wrong way, right? So Patanjali, he threw light on the right way of doing that, okay, which is highlighted by the niyamas. Okay, so when it comes to yamas, there are 5 yamas. Okay, there are 5, both yamas and yamas, they are 5 in number. Okay, so I'm writing down the yamas. First, we'll cover them. All right. Okay. So first one is ahimsa. AHIMSA, which is your non-violence. All right. Second is Satya, SATYA, or truth. Third one is Aste, or non-stealing. ASTEYA. Okay. Fourth one is Brahmacharya, or celibacy. And your fifth one is hmm, fifth one is aparigraha, or non-possessiveness. APARIGRAHA. Okay. So let's start understanding them one by one and how we can incorporate them in our own lives. Okay, so that's the most relevant portion, because whatever you are studying, if you are unable to implement that, then it will do you no good, right? So whatever you can implement out of this, you guys should try to implement, right? If you ever go for any kind of very serious meditation program, right, or any sort of retreat, you will see that the yamas are a part of it, like a precondition, right? So yamas, they deeply cleanse a person, right? Deeply cleanse the actions and the thoughts. So yamas are not only just seen in your way of conduction, it is also about the thoughts that you are having, right? So suppose I'm conducting myself like I'm not harming anyone, right? But in my mind, consistently there is this thought: I wish this person, they would get hurt, right? So this means that the yama is not being followed properly. Okay, it's not only about your physical actions, right? So on both the levels, it should come up, right? When you were talking of karma yoga also, then I told you one action is taking place in the mind, right? And that is also very important. It's also very important to gain or cleanse that portion, right? So yamas and niyamas both are taking place both on the mental and the physical level, but it's easier to begin from the physical level. All right. So if you are starting your work, then maybe conducting your actions or changing how you are doing the actions will help you to eventually even work with your mind. All right. So sometimes we change the thought and then we change our actions, but the other way around will also help you. Okay. If you change the actions, you will see eventually your thoughts also begin to change, right? So first one is your ahimsa or uh, non-violence. So this term himsa, HIMSA, this means violence. Okay, and when we add a as a prefix, it means opposite. So non-violence. Okay. So now violence again doesn't necessarily mean that you go and kill somebody, go out of your way and kill somebody, right? It can reflect in your actions and your thoughts. It doesn't mean that you specifically have to set an intention and go work towards that, right? Ahimsa means non-violence in your actions and your thoughts. Now, even the thoughts are so deeply cleansed that you do not generate this kind of thought, right? The thought of harming someone, right? Sometimes all of us have thoughts of harming something or someone. It could be something that you really dislike, right? Maybe you don't like an insect, right? So you have this, you know, a desire to harm them, right? You're not doing it from the point of view of harming them. You just have a dislike for them, but there is this sense of harm, right? And the yogi exists in a way of non-violence. Why? Because the yogi realizes that there is a deep connection between themselves and their environment. Okay, so if the yogi understands this very, very deeply, so they know if they harm everything around them, then they are a part of it, right? This we have discussed before also. If you set fire all around you and you go sit in your house, right, it's bound to hurt you eventually, or you will at least feel the heat, right, around you. So yogi also realizes this, and on such a deep level that you will see they don't like wear slippers, right? Because they know if they are wearing slippers, right, so they are going to step on something, right? Yogi is very conscious and aware of the actions. You will never see the yogi chooses to walk, right, doesn't take any transportation, because transportation is also hurting the environment, right? Any form of transportation, he understands it's hurting the environment, right? We talk of the psychic powers, right, which come along with yoga, right? um, so at that point of time, it is a very surprising thing that in earlier times electricity did not exist, you know. And it is, if you actually look deeply into it, it's not that surprising, because at that point of time people were very close to nature. They could see that everything that they are doing, it's going to it's hurting the nature. So the yogi must have been aware of concepts like electricity, right? But even then they did not introduce that into the world, because since electricity has come in, you know, the levels of pollution have reached another level only, right? The environment is so badly harmed, right? And all of this, consciously or subconsciously, whatever, most of the things that we are using in our lives, it's hurting the environment, right? And we are not we are still developing our awareness, right? How much we are hurting. If you guys live close to nature, you will see it very immediately. You will see the impact very immediately, whatever you are doing, right? What kind of impact it is having. Suppose you are buying uh, anything that is packed in plastic, right? And if you live close to the nature, you will see how these things are disposed of, right? If you burn plastic, it's going to harm the air, right? Or there is no proper way of disposing the plastic, right? So the closer you exist to nature, the more you are in touch with what is happening with that waste, right? If you live in a city, it's just as easy as disposing it off, and it goes out of your house, maybe in a system where it might be recycled or might not. But you are very disconnected, right? What is happening, how the food is coming to you, you are not connected with that. But when you live close to the environment, you grow your own things, you get more connected. Okay, this is happening, or that is happening. Or if you grow your own food, right? And after like tasting that, you see how much chemical we are consuming, right? Whatever food you're getting from the market, how much chemical that food has. You know, we are not in touch with the process that is taking place in order to get the things we have, right? And that is why we are very disconnected, right? Even we cannot be blamed. It's how the system is working these days, right? So we are so busy in our lives that we have completely lost touch, right? And in so many ways, without realizing, we are harming the environment, right? So first thing is that you come into a place. So this is on a very deep level also that I'm talking. You cannot avoid everything, but simple little things you can begin to change in your life, which will lead to at least a drop in the demand of such goods, right? On a personal level, it's the only way in which we can help the system, right? We cannot reverse the system, but at least being more conscious of whatever you are choosing to use. Maybe change your detergent so that that chemical doesn't enter the water, right? Or maybe you can choose to go for you know um, non-synthetic kind of clothing, or don't buy packed food, right? Whatever you can, whatever contribution you can make, you can begin with that, which will lead to, at least you on a personal level will change the um, will realize the indirect impact it is having, right? And the yogi incorporates non-violence on such a deep level that even creatures who are violent towards each other, right, naturally, they, in the yogi's presence, they become friends, right? Like a tiger and a deer, right? If the yogi is over there, both of them will never attack each other, they will become friendly. So that is the depth till which the non-violence goes, seeps into the yogi's being, right? That people who are generally, or creatures who are generally harming each other, they also become friendly, right? And in the Yoga Sutras, it is written yamas and niyamas alone have a lot of strength. You don't have to necessarily perfect any posture, right? If you follow yamas and niyamas deeply, there are a lot of things that you get by default, right? So then let's come to the next one, right? Which is your satya, right? So satya is truth, all right? So not your truth or my truth. You know, if you ever become a part of any conflict and maybe you are a common friend, you will see why one person is saying something, and then you will understand your other friend also, right? So both of them have their own truths, right? But when we talk of the truth over here, we are talking of the universal truth, right? Facts which are not changed. No matter how many people come and go, certain facts um, remain the reality of life. Like, you know, if there is, if you are born, you will die, right? This is one of the realities that you will come across when you read more and more on such topics, right? So if you are born, you will die, and nobody is free from this, right? No matter which tree, you know, any tree which lives for a very long period of time, eventually they also die, right? Maybe not as their lifespan is really, really long, right? But even they are not free of this cycle, right? So the yogi, you will see, begins to live uh, with the understanding of this truth, right? So there are certain universal truths that have been given no matter which religion you pick up, which text you pick up, right? There are certain realities which have been talked of, right? And the yogi makes decisions and lives life in harmony with these truths, right? Like I keep telling you, okay, or even in your meditation class, your teacher will keep telling you everything is impermanent, everything is impermanent, right? So we listen to it, we try to understand it, but we are not living our lives like that, are we? No, right? We are not, because the deep realization has not come in yet, right? So the yogi lives uh, in harmony with these things, you know, the universal truths, not his truth or your truth or my truth, but some things that are bound to be true no matter what, right? Then let's come to your third um, yama, which is aste or non-stealing, right? So this is quite interesting, right? So we don't specifically steal, right? But we still are stealing in some form or the other, right? And the only way in which we can come out of this pattern of mind is by taking permission, right? So when we talk of stealing, stealing means taking something without the permission of the person who owns it, right? So suppose you work somewhere, right? And by default you feel that these things you can do, right? But maybe because you get this deeper understanding or sense of awareness that these are not by default that you are getting these things, so maybe you begin to take the permission of the people, right? So I'll give you a very common example. So like you know, um, over here we have a kitchen, right? So now we can just walk in, and if you need something we can take that thing, right? Because we all the students, teachers, they are living over here, right? But still it's always good to ask the people who work in the kitchen, right? Because it is their responsibility to feed everybody, to make the food, right? So it's always good to take the permission of the person who is in charge for that thing, right? Before you acquire that thing, okay? This helps you to lose the sense of entitlement you have over things, right? There's so many things that we just have in our life by default, you know, we don't even ask, or we don't even pause to feel grateful for everything we are getting, right? But um, it's always good to stop, right, and take the permission. Don't ever take something without the permission of the people who are responsible for that thing, right? It's only going to hurt you and your intention. So subconsciously right now we all are doing it on some level, but as you go deeper into your meditation, you will be more aware of each and every action that you are taking, right? Your sense of awareness is going to deepen to a great extent, right? So this non-stealing attitude, so it takes place in the form of ideas also. Suppose you and I, we are sitting and we are discussing some idea, right? And then I choose to act upon it, right? So many empires have, so many law cases, legal suits have been filed just on this basis, right? Where we are, somebody was discussing a particular idea and someone else, took action on it and capitalized that thing. So it is stealing, right? The permission was not taken and then the action was taken. So of course the person is going to, feel violated, right? So on the idea level also, we are constantly taking ideas from here and there with all the information going free for everybody, be it movies, be it, music. We are somewhere or the other getting all of this for free, right? And it feels so good, no? But we are not taking the permission. We are um, taking those ideas, those concepts, but permission is not taken, right? So on a very deep level, I'm again capturing this entire emotion, right? So for now, it's okay. Step by step change your actions. Never go into extremes that you'll cut everything off. No, step by step, whatever you can cut down on, try to cut down on that thing, right? So because stealing is something we think it's external to us, right? But when you realize that it is it's existing in our own actions also, subconsciously we are doing it. We are not doing this consciously, right? Subconsciously or unconsciously we are doing these things. So you become aware of each and every action and you begin to set that in place, right? So next one we have, this one has a lot of controversy around it, right? So brahmacharya. So I have written the loose translation of this term. Okay, very loose translation, right? So first let me explain it in the other way. Okay, so brahmacharya. So over here we have the concept of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. Okay, so creator, preserver, and destroyer. Okay, and most of the places, most of the religions have these three characters, right? One is the source of creation, one is preserving everything, and one destroys, right? So Brahma is the creator. Okay, Brahma is the creator. Okay, and Acharan, AC, uh, Acharan is not written over here, but Acharya, Acharya. Okay, so this is conduction. Conduction like whom? Brahma, the creator, God like conduction. Basically, this term actually, if you go into understanding the meaning of brahmacharya, it means God like conduction. Okay, so celibacy is more loosely translated. It's loosely translated as celibacy, but how do you act when you who you are? How do you exist? Your actions are God-like. Now, God-like doesn't mean that you are, you know, um, completely leaving everything or thinking that, oh, you are God, But God-like means whichever God you like, there are some qualities that God has, So when you work on brahmacharya, you're basically trying to incorporate more and more of those qualities within you, like Jesus Christ. Okay, so let's take his example. So he loved so unconditionally, right, that he sacrificed his own life for the people, for the good of the people around him. right? This doesn't mean you go and sacrifice your life, guys. No, this just means that the love, his quality of loving, it was such a pure and deep love, right? That he had such concern, such like care, right? And he never had this thing in him that I am God's son, right? He lived like a common man. He never, asked that give me this special treatment or that special treatment, right? So when you choose a particular God for yourself, look at the qualities, right? Look at what you like about them and try to incorporate that in your life. Do more and more of that, work more and more on those things, so that will help you to conduct yourself in that way. All right. Now the other meaning which I have written, so brahmacharya is celibacy, right? So this also means different things for different people, right? So one thing is that if you are not married, then a very traditional way of looking at it, if you are not married, you do not um, um, participate in sexual activities, right? And if you're married, you only participate in sexual activities with the person you are married. Okay. So one way of translating this came out to be this, right? That this is how a person is supposed to conduct themselves, right? Now, this thing cannot be forced. No yama can be forced. Okay. But specifically, I mentioned this while discussing this particular yama. Why? Because you will see a lot of people, who want to practice, right? They force themselves to be in a state of celibacy. Their mind is not ready, their body is not ready, but they force themselves. And the more you suppress a desire, the greater it will backfire. Like it will come back with greater intensity, right? So this state is not forced, okay? This state of not engaging in sexual activities, this state comes naturally. Okay, there comes a point where the yogi decides to rise above the bodily desires. Okay, so it cannot be forced and it comes at a very, very later stage. All right, all of us, we are not free from these things, right? And it comes with deep level of meditation, right? So right now, how you can change this for yourself, right? So you can be more aware when you are engaging in any form of sexual activity, right? So your sense of awareness should increase, right? You shouldn't be like doing things absent-mindedly, right? And that applies to this thing also. Whenever you are engaging in any form of sexual activity, start becoming more aware, right? How you are feeling, right? What how your breathing is, maybe your heart rate, check that. Okay. Become aware of the bodily sensations, be more aware, right, while you are engaging in the sexual activities, right? And later on, naturally this state will come for you guys also, naturally, with a lot of practice. This is one desire which will not go easily. Okay, I will be very, very clear about this thing. This one desire will not go away easily. You think it goes away, then it comes back and grips you, because this is the need of the body. And even in Ayurveda, you would have studied, no? If you deny the need of the body, you will have disease, right? If you suppose if you don't burp, right, whenever you are feeling that urge, okay, so you will cause disease in the body, right? So you have to be in sync with your body, right? But don't also go into the other extreme where you are just going into excessive engagement, right? So you have to find a balance. Again, for us the key is to find the balance between both the things, right? And you cannot deny your bodily need. If you suppress this need, you will end up with disease. Okay, So there is no need to suppress this. The yogi reaches this state naturally. And why this state is important is because there are only two, if we look majorly at our entire structure, there are two ways in which the energy moves, right? Either it will move downward or it will go upward. Now, yogi is aiming consistently what? For the upward movement of the energy, right? So when you engage in any kind of sexual activity, the energy flows downward, right? And this sexual intercourse is actually very, very powerful. You know, it has the ability to create another human being, you know, it's that powerful, right? So a lot of energy gets drained, right? So what the yogi eventually comes naturally to this realization that, okay, now I'm not going to allow this energy to escape or flow downward, right? Because energy is limited, like the number of hours in the day, they are limited. So you can choose to do what you do with them, right? So the yogi then chooses, okay, chooses not to engage in the sexual activity so that the same energy can be channeled upwards. Okay, so the entire aim is to channel this energy upward, right? So whenever you guys reach this kind of realization naturally, that is when you can adopt this one. Okay, before that there is no need to force yourself. I really do not believe that anybody should suppress any kind of desire. Don't react also, don't suppress also. Come in an observing state, however much you can, right? There's nothing wrong, there is no taboo, there should be no taboo around such topics, right? So you guys also, just because you are you have chosen the path of yoga, that doesn't mean that you know, people just look at you and they are like that. No, this is a common human desire, you know, and the yogi is accepting of these things. You know, the yogi doesn't shun anything away. The yogi is always accepting of the things, right? So let's come to our last uh, yama. Okay, then we will continue our discussion tomorrow. So aparigraha or non-possessiveness. All right. This is again a very important yama, right? So first I'll give you a story, right, on this, and then I will continue to explain this. So my own personal kind of story. So, you know, in the lockdown, my sister, you know, she's a very like social activist kind of person, right? So she really believes in, you know, um, um, making a difference, right? That her actions make a difference. So she regularly, you know, donates clothes. Okay. So whatever she's not using, she after few days she will go and check, and if she hasn't used something for some time, right, she immediately, you know, puts it in another stack, and then she goes and donates her clothes. So whenever she does this, you know, everybody in the family, she is just like, she comes to everybody and she's just like, you know, whatever you haven't been using, take that out. Okay. And I will go and donate because I'm anyway going to go and donate my clothes. So all of us, you know, we start, we check whatever we haven't been wearing or using, right? So one specific incident in the lockdown where I became very aware of how possessive I am of my clothes. Okay, so I really love my t-shirts, right? If I'm sharing my t-shirt with someone, means that person is very close to me. Okay, so I went to my almirah and I started looking at my clothes, right? And I have a lot of t-shirts. Okay, I will not even lie about it, right? So I have a lot of t-shirts, and most of them I have only worn one or two times. Okay, so I'm that kid. Okay, so I was looking at all of the t-shirts and I was just like that. What should I donate? You know, so my mind, it's so intelligent, no?
So what I did was that one particular t-shirt I came across, I had just worn it 1 or 2 times, right? So my mind was just say, in this color, I only have this t-shirt, right? So I should probably keep this, right? Then another t-shirt I came to, so that was polo style. So I was just like, polo one, I only have this one, so I should keep this one, right? Then this happened with a lot of like clothes that I had, right? So eventually I had so many t-shirts that I really had worn for only 1 or 2 occasions, right? And eventually my stack was this much, right? And my sister looked at me and she was just like, okay, this has happened. I know how many clothes you have and this is what you have come up with. So that is when, and when you actually revisit your Almira, right? So for a few days, you become very excited, no, that you have so many clothes, right? So every day now, in order to support that, I had saved all my t-shirts, every other day I was wearing a different color, right? Because I also got very excited. I forgot that there were some clothes, right? So I also started wearing all of them. And after 1 week, all of that was gone, right? After 1 week, again, I was back to my 3 common t-shirts, 3 common lowers. And it is so sad. I still wear only like 3, 4 clothes that I really love. Okay, apart from that, all of that is like just kept over there in my Almira, right? And especially since like I came over here, so half of the clothes got cut off only. Why? Because I couldn't carry everything right over here, right? So now I'm completely unaware. Those clothes are still sitting in my Almira, right? And I could have donated those. Somebody could have used those clothes, right? And this actually got me more in sync with how possessive I am, or how possessive we are, right, towards our own things, right? And you know especially when it comes to fashion, right, it's very fast changing, right? So we want to get everything, but we don't wear those things. And clothing is one industry which is causing so much pollution, right? So this jacket I have had for what, about 4 5 years now, right? Same jacket going on, and this will stay with me for another 4 5 years minimum, right? I will make sure, right? So it's a one time buy and I'm using it every day. I wear this jacket. So this thing, we have created the barriers. There are enough clothes for everyone in the world, you know but it is our possessive attitude which doesn't allow the clothes to reach everybody who needs them, right? Don't you think there are enough clothes? Malls are full of clothes, shops are full of clothes, and still you see people, you know, who don't even have 2 pairs of clothes, right, to survive, right? And it is such a disappointment. Like, what are we doing as human beings? We are we were supposed to make sure that everybody has enough to survive, right? And we are placing prices, we are placing barriers so that nobody can attain those things, right? And it is only because of this possessive attitude, right? It's not only in the case of clothes, guys. So for me, it hit me when I was clearing my Almira, but it is in the case of so many things that this possessive attitude comes in, right? We don't need that much, right? So go clear out your space, right? You don't need so much, right? But maybe somebody, for someone, it can actually make a difference, right? Having that extra jacket. There's so many people in winters who die because it's so cold, right? And they don't have those things. And there is enough food, there is enough water, right? There are enough clothes, places to stay, right? But we have created this distinction: who can stay or who can have those resources and who cannot, right? And our entire life is driven by this sense of possessiveness, right? That is why when you see a yogi, yogi wears what 1 or 2 clothes only yogi has, right? Very small bag, just one container in which they eat food. To leave this behind, and there is so intense attachment even to those 1 or 2 things, right? So even if you get free from most of your things, you will see your sense of possessiveness towards those 1 or 2 things that you keep is going to be very, very high. It's very difficult to get free from this possessiveness, right? But as you deepen your meditation, that is why I told you guys, never miss your meditation class, right? That's the only way in which you can make your mind flexible enough, right? Where you gain this deeper understanding, right? Where the mind actually begins to reset, right? So you basically have to unlearn everything you have learned, right? And start understanding living your life is completely different than all the schooling system, all the textbooks, everything, right? So it's when you begin to unlearn the things that you have been taught, right, that you actually begin to live a more satisfying life. Personally, more satisfaction comes into your life, right, as your awareness deepens, right? So these are your first limb yamas, right? So tomorrow we will discuss the other limbs, right, the niyamas and all the remaining limbs. Any doubts in today's session? Anything that you want to discuss? All right. So let's end our class today. Keep your back neck straight and gently close your eyes. We'll chant Om one time, followed by 3 Shantis. Inhale deeply for Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Join your palms together, gently bow down, taking a few moments in our day for a sense of gratitude. Rub the palms together. Keep them on the wrist. Very slowly, while blinking and looking at your palms, begin to open up your eyes, start coming back with a smile. Namaste to everyone. I will see all of you for your pranayam class, and whatever we have covered today, if there is something you feel you can incorporate in your life, so you can go ahead and already begin your work, right? So take care guys, bye bye.